So hi again, everyone. My name is Vivian Tang, and I'm the treasurer of UXTerps. And today I'll be moderating this session. Would any other UXTerps officers would like to unmute yourself, say hi, wave, say hello? Feel free to do so right now. So basically, a lot of us with this background that I'm having is a part of UXTerps, and yeah, they say hi.
Hey everyone.
Hi. And yes, thank you again for attending our first UXTerps talk of the school year and our first event of 2021. Today, we're very honored to have Aashrey Sharma here to share his insights on how to make your portfolio a success. Specifically, he'll discuss how to make your portfolio more readable, scannable, and compelling to recruiters and hiring managers in a more efficient manner. And so a little bit more about Aashrey's background. He is a recent HCIM alum from the class of 2020 and a product designer at Epic Games. At Epic Games, he works on the Houseparty team, yay, where they design new features for the mobile app and deep social integrations with Fortnite. Following Aashrey's presentation, there will be a 15-minute Q&A session. Feel free to leave your comments and questions in the chat as they come up, and we'll try to address all of them. After the Q&A session, we will move on to a portfolio review, where Aashrey will share his screen and review 3 portfolios submitted by our participants. And I just want to say thanks again to those participants who volunteered to share your portfolios with him beforehand. And without further ado, I'll let Aashrey take it away and start his presentation. Thank you.
Oh, just to note, I wanted to do like a realistic portfolio review scenario where I have not looked at these before. So I will be reviewing them on the spot, seeing them for pretty much the first time. So that is that. So thanks, Vivian, for the great introduction. Yeah, so I'm Aashrey Sharma. I was literally in this program like last year, May 2020. So I'm excited to come back and speak to you folks about what is possibly the most agonizing and, soul-sucking part of the profession we are in is like, how do you present your work to other people? And how do you make your portfolio a good, engaging experience, right? I don't know how we can do votes, but I just wanted to get a quick demo of the room. How many of you are second year HCIM students, first year HCIM students, undergrads, or stuff like that? If there's numbers, just leave them in the chat. It'll help me get a sense of the people I'm talking to. But yeah, great. Let's get started with the deck. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so this is some more information about me. Vivian covered this stuff, but I'm working at Epic Games right now on the Houseparty team. And I'm an international student, so I originally hail from India, and I joined the program in 2018, graduating in 2020. But let's start talking about portfolios and think about, what is the purpose of your portfolio and what is your primary audience to start, because that kind of gives you a framework to start thinking about, okay, what is the function that this website is supposed to serve, as opposed to, what do I want to design here? So a portfolio is very simply, it's a collection of your work for recruiters and hiring managers to look at to decide if they want to interview you. That is the only function it serves from a job search perspective. You want to show it to a recruiter or hiring manager, and you want to show them enough information that they call you, but not enough that they, know your story inside out or like everything you've ever done in the UX profession. Because those details ideally are better reserved for the interviews, where you can tell them more about your work, more about your process. Your portfolio is really to get them to decide that, hey, I want to call this person and talk to them. So if we think about that, right, your audience is the recruiter and the hiring managers. And let's paint a picture. What do they look like? What are their characteristics? What information do you need to account while designing your portfolio for them? First and foremost, they're very busy people. Recruiters and hiring managers, typically recruiters will go through hundreds of applications every day. Hiring managers are also, active UX designers or product managers, or just they have functions which they have other responsibilities to report to. So it's not just reviews that they do all day. Again, they see hundreds of portfolios a day. They spend about 2 to 3 minutes looking at a portfolio. So you really don't have a lot of time to, show them your work. Your website has to get to the point really quick. Because they spend so much time looking at portfolios, their judgments are often based on rules of thumb. Like, this person's portfolio is not responsive, so they must not care so much about UX design. Like, that's a snap judgment that they can make. And you want to be careful about those, because snap judgments often lead to the quickest rejections. And lastly, they are risk averse. Like, no one wants to hire the wrong person. And the thing about the job search process is it's designed to keep people out. Fundamentally, it's designed so that they can weed out bad candidates. And the candidate they do end up picking is not like the perfect candidate for the role. They're just good enough, right? That's what it is. So risk aversion is a strong part of this process. Now, considering all of that, how do you go from that information to creating a sticky portfolio, something that will stay in the minds of the reviewers and the people who look at it, and ultimately lead to that first call from the recruiter? When you think about it from a goal setting perspective, your job then becomes to basically let your readers consume your portfolio effectively. So you're conveying your story, you're conveying the details of your the case studies and everything, but you want to do it as quickly and as easily as possible. You don't want them to spend too much time or have to think about it too much. It should all be easy and intuitive. Now, this can be expressed as certain principles, which is what I want to talk about today. Like, there are 4 principles that can really help you get to that goal fast and easily. And they are these principles. So let's go through them one by one. Show your best work is one which gets thrown around a lot. Like, it almost sounds cliche, but the thing is, when you think about the risk aversion of all the recruiters and hiring managers, this is where most people get caught. You have 3 great projects, and then you include one project where you either didn't have the strongest research rationale, like how your research led to your design, or you made assumptions that you didn't explain properly. They will, if they happen to see that one case study and then look at your good work, it casts doubt on all the rest of your work. So it brings down your entire portfolio, and oftentimes it can lead to them not calling you. So when you're looking at your body of work, only pick the best things to put in your portfolio. 2 to 4 projects is great. And for those who are just starting in your first year, it's okay to include, class projects as well. That's fine. Just make sure that you really think they are your best work. Now, having said that, how do you choose what is your best work, quote unquote, right? And it helps to think about it in terms of these questions that you can ask yourself. Are you proud of this work? Does it showcase the right skills for this employer? Like, if they're looking for wireframing skills, does this project showcase wireframing? If not, then it's not the best work for that scenario. Do you want to work in this industry? That's probably the most important one. If you have work which you've done in the tech industry, but you want to get a job in the fashion industry, then there's a mismatch there, both in your aspirations and the work you're showing. So you want to align your work with the industry you're intending to get a job in. Did you have fun doing it? This is critical because you want to be passionate about this work at the end of the day. If you have the passion for the work, it'll show itself in how you write your case study, how you design the visuals for your portfolio around that case study. It comes out in like these very small ways, but is immediately noticeable to your readers. And lastly, do you want to do this again? So can you see yourself doing this on a daily basis? That is a pretty important one too. And when you go through your projects, really try and think about it. Are you having fun? Are you enjoying this? Is this something that you would do for a long time? So I'll give you an example from my portfolio of how I curated this. I have 4 projects on my portfolio. They're all more or less in the tech space of like, mobile apps, websites, of tech startups or something like that. But my one of the goals I had when I was looking for a job was to get a job in the gaming industry. So I actually included a project that was just all mine. There was no real client. It was a personal project about redesigning a video game called Anthem. Um, and I did the research and the work for this, and it was one of the most fun projects I'd done, and the work spoke to that. So I had very strong deliverables. I put it on my portfolio, and this project actually led to my call with Epic Games. Like the recruiter saw this and he was impressed, even though it doesn't have the markings of like, unsolicited redesigns are often looked down upon because, you create your own problem and then you solve it. Or people like it when you have a client attached to your work because then you did it under real constraints with like real teams and things like that. But when you're selecting your best work, the 4 questions I mentioned really help you gauge it, despite not having these markers of traditionally good projects, like having clients or having worked with different stakeholders and things like that. So keep those in mind. That is very important at the very beginning because you want to curate your projects, and then you can start to think about the other principles once you've pre-curated your project list. Now, the second one is writing concisely. This arguably is the most important for your case studies, the individual case studies you write. And the easiest way to think about this is you want to respect your reader's time. Recruiters and hiring managers are busy people, as I mentioned. They got 2 to 3 minutes to look at your portfolio. They will get through maybe one full case study if they are really interested. You want to make sure that that time is well spent and you show them only the best parts of your work or the most engaging parts of your work. So try and aim for a reading time of 2 to 4 minutes. This is critical. Your case study should read like a very well-written Medium article, not like a long academic essay. And this sums it up the best. For those of you who aren't familiar, this is a quote from The Office. Anyway, so here's some things that I've done. The first thing I did was I started imposing, to write concisely, I started imposing an 800-word limit on my case studies. So what happened was after I did that, my paragraphs became really small. Like this paragraph on the right side of my screen is the entire paragraph I wrote for research findings and research process in one of my case studies. And it really conveys the methods I used and like what sort of intention was there, and the results that I got after that. Another great example of concise writing is from Liz Wells. She is a product designer based in Brooklyn, and she does some great work. I'll drop a link to her portfolio at the end if I haven't already. But she does this thing where she breaks her case studies down into 2 sections. The first one is UX challenges, and the second one is UX solutions. There's no specific section for research process or interviews or whatever, right? And there's no specific section for wireframing, iterations, mid-fidelity prototypes or whatnot. Everything is collapsed into 2 sections, and if you read them, you have the entire case study in your mind. So that's a great way of doing it as well. Going hand in hand with writing concisely. So when you've reduced the amount of words you want to put on paper, what you can start doing is you can start putting more emphasis on the images because they can tell a richer story. And it goes to say that people understand pictures faster than words. This is anecdotal, but also it's a very well-established cognitive science principle. So if you can show and not describe your work, that is ideal. And there are a few ways of doing that. The first one is the prototype video, which every case study should have. If you've designed a product or if you shipped something to engineering in one of your projects, right? Always mock it up as a prototype. It'll help your teammates understand your work better, and it also makes for great case study material. So this is an example of a prototype I did for Houseparty when I was applying to that team. This came out of one of my design challenges, but this is a perfect example of something that you would include right at the top of your case study to say, hey, this is what this entire project was. Like I did the research and this is what came out of it. Then you can start breaking it down into different sections about what the problem was, why was this the right solution, who did you talk to about it, things like that. But seeing this at the very top of your case study will bring it all together for the reader, and they will be invested in that story from that point on. The other thing that I've found is very helpful is creating what I call an artifact spread. An artifact spread essentially is a collage of like related design or research materials that led to interesting findings. So for my work at Fiscal Note, that was my summer internship. What I ended up doing was I created this collage which captured all of my research material, all of my research efforts with their deliverables and what I learned from them. Now, think about it like this. I could have made this collage, or I could have wrote 4 really bulky paragraphs explaining each of these methods and the results I found. So that's the trade-off I'm talking about. If you create an image which can function as what you would write in a paragraph, you've just saved yourself a ton of words. And the image will work better to tell your story any day if you've designed it with, a reader in mind, like the recruiter or the hiring manager. So doing that is the key here. You basically want to take words and create an image out of those words, so you don't have to write it in your portfolio anymore. Yeah, so the artifact spread is great for that. It's great for condensing very dense sections into understandable images. And lastly, or I don't know if this is the last one, but the before and after is also very good for showcasing work, because you don't have to describe your design anymore in that much detail. You could just say, hey, this was what it was before, this is what it is after. And if you want, just annotate the parts that were important that changed. So for example, here, I redesigned the character customization screen in the Anthem video game that I was talking about earlier. And I could have belabored the point. Like I could have written an entire section of my case study, maybe 400 words, explaining why each change was made. But I highlighted the main point of the main user impact point on the left, and then I just added this slider, which could let the user see, hey, this was the thing before, this is what it is after. And this also makes your portfolio more interactive and engaging. Because if you're just reading an article and you feel no agency to engage in it, you're more likely to step away, because again, you can always come back to it later. So this is a great example of just adding interactivity, but also conveying a point very quickly. And lastly, this is a favorite of Bill Kula's. You should annotate every piece of design you put on your portfolio, because no one's going to know what specific thing changed if you don't literally point an arrow to it. So always annotate your work just for the benefit of the reader. Remember, your ultimate goal is to be, your portfolio's goal is to be in service of the reader. So anything you can do to make their life easier, make them understand things faster, do those things. And annotation is probably the easiest thing to do. Needs no design effort whatsoever. Just throw some text and arrows and you're good. And yeah, the last thing is often neglected in this sense. Like, you've done all the work for your portfolio, you've written the case studies, you've optimized them to the right word count, the right reading time, and you've got great visuals in there. But like, you have to then think about the UX of your website, because it reflects on your skills. And some recruiters and hiring managers will basically disqualify you if your website loads too slow or is not responsive and things like that. Because often these reviews occur in very boring meetings when someone's just like, yeah, I'm going to look at my phone instead, or something like that. Like, they're doing a secondary task, and their secondary task is to review your portfolio. So you want to make it as easy as possible. And a couple of things, or the things you should focus on right away are, firstly, make your portfolio responsive. If it doesn't work on mobile, I guarantee you a lot of high tier design companies will outright reject you, because the designers there are like, the designers and engineers have to really deal with responsive design on a day-to-day basis. So Google, Dropbox, HubSpot, companies like this with very established design processes will almost require that the portfolio be responsive. The next thing to think about is loading time. I've gone to literally hundreds of portfolio websites that don't open like till after 10 seconds of hitting the URL. Now that is critical. And this is 10 seconds of loading on like a good connection here in the United States. If the company you're applying to is abroad and has, or a part of the United States that has shitty internet, it will take a long time. So make sure your website loads as fast as possible. Now you can look up guides to optimize your content, but it really breaks down to doing two things. First, make sure all the images that you upload to your website are compressed. Second, make sure all the videos are also compressed. Compression is key. So all the assets, all the graphical assets you upload to your portfolio, just Google how to compress them efficiently and then just do that and you'll be fine. Make sure you have a very clear link to your resume and it's in the header somewhere or somewhere visible, like close in the vicinity of your work section, so people can find it easily. And then also include social links, like your LinkedIn, your Instagram, if you want to, just to give them a perspective of who you are outside of work. All right, so that was a lot. So let's take a minute to think about it, reflect on, the things. This is also a good moment to gather questions that you might have for Q&A. But the thing I want to reiterate again is your portfolio is serving a very specific audience. So always remember that the recruiters and hiring managers are terribly busy people. Just make sure that whatever you do is in service of their time. Not necessarily you could want to make your portfolio look very flashy or have extremely like fluid animations, but if those animations take away from the reading experience, it's a no-go. So everything you do, make sure it's in service of the reader. Right. Okay, let's recap real quick. What did we talk about? Firstly, your audience is short on time. Respect that. Your goal is for them to consume your portfolio very effectively and very fast. And you can do that first by showing them only your best work so that no matter what project they click on, they see that you're an awesome designer and they want to call you. You want to make sure your case studies are short, so when they start reading, they don't scroll down and see, oh shit, this goes on forever and I don't have the time to read it. They want to make sure that it's a short case study, they can get through it quick, and you really have to get to the point fast. You want to use expressive visuals. Tell your story through images rather than words, and it sticks more because people tend to remember it. It's more engaging. And lastly, your website needs to have good UX. Now for specific cases of writing, I can recommend that you look at Liz Weld's portfolio. Kurt Winter's design is a great portfolio as well. You can look at my portfolio too. I'm not in the same league as maybe Kurt Winters, but there's a great amount of content there that would help like you guys coming out of the program or even now in the program to get to a good place. Right. And that's it. Thanks for hanging out and listening to me talk. I just want to say that these principles actually helped me land my position at Epic Games. Like once I reached this point in my portfolio, I did not change it. I followed the rules and the principles I outlined. Every case study was 800 words. Every image was created to tell a story. And I made sure that my website loads fast, it was responsive, all of these things. And they help get you that first call. And from there, you can keep impressing them with more good work. So I know we ended early. That just means we have more time for questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aashrey. That was very, very insightful. And as a first-year HCIM student, I just learned a whole bunch just from that presentation. And
thanks, Vivian. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And just to answer your question from before, I saw that about 10 of us posted in the chat saying that we're first-year HCIM students, and there's also a good, decent number of undergrads here and also second-year HCIM students, just to give you an idea.
Cool, that sounds great.
Yeah.
I like that there's undergrad folks too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's super awesome.
Yep. And then now we'll move on to Q&A. Marcus will read out the questions from the chat, and afterwards, feel free to also unmute yourselves and ask your questions too.
Yeah, that works.
Yep.
I'm gonna stop sharing my deck. I just want to see everyone's video up on screen.
Okay, so for our first question, Niku asked, how did you create the before and after slider?
Great question. Sorry, could you say their name again?
Niku?
Niku. Niku, great question. So I created that with a tool called Semplice. Semplice is a portfolio design tool. Here, I'm going to put it in chat. But they have a module which lets you do a before and after. If you do not want to do that, because Semplice is a paid tool, what you can do is in your prototyping tools, you can just create an image slider and record a video and put it on loop. So then you get it for free. You don't need tools at all. You can just create a going back and forth video.
Okay. Joel asked for recommendations for sites to host your portfolio.
Oh, great. Joel, not too sure about like what the different hosting services are. I personally use Bluehost. They haven't given me any trouble. But yeah, just I would recommend Bluehost, or if you want to do more research, just take anything that gives you fast load speeds in the States and other countries that you're trying to apply for.
Okay. Sorry if I butcher your name, but Dongyan asked, "Is it looked down upon if we use web builders to create our website?"
No, not really. No one. I don't think people care too much. And counterpoint, in case they do care if you use the website builder, you don't want to work for that company because they're judging you for the tools you use, which is terrible. So no, most people won't care. And if they do, don't join that company. I see there's a question from Arjun. Hey.
Hey, buddy. How's it going?
Hey, man. Nice to talk to you again.
Yeah.
Okay, so Arjun's question is, what if you're coming from a visual design background and you have UX as well as other design projects, branding, game design, etc.? Okay, so here's what I would do. I would say pick a focus. Let's say you want to get a job as a UX designer. So pick a focus, separate your work into two sections. First is my work or my professional work or whatever. Put UX stuff in there. You basically want to clearly differentiate your UX work from your other work because you don't want to confuse your reader as to what project they're now seeing when they click. And then in the second section, you can say, hey, these are my other interests or my hobbies, or I code in my free time, or I do game design and visual branding projects. Everything else can go there. Just make sure to separate them very clearly.
We have a question from Vivian. She basically said, advice I see a lot is to have a storytelling element within our case studies. Would you agree? And how can we make sure we get this across?
Great question, Vivian. So yeah, storytelling is critical. And even within, like, if you set a word limit for yourself, or if you give yourself a defined structure, right? Storytelling really begins when you first invest the user in your case study. And the way you invest them is you show them something, which is the final product, which is, either cool looking or shows like a very cool story, either on video format, or you could do like, hey, this was the product before, then we did our UX magic, and this is it afterward. But you can basically divide up your words so that you focus more on the journey of like what the problem was, how you solved it, and less on the mechanics of, hey, I did this method and that result came out of it. This can all be delegated to visuals or just very thoughtful graphics. So I agree. And it's difficult to answer like how you could write a convincing story, but I would recommend you look at Liz Wells's portfolio because she does this really well in very few words. Yeah.
Okay. Thai asked, does it make a huge difference for you to have your own domain?
This is one of those things where some people care and some don't, and I don't know what the right answer is. If you can get your own domain, get it. It just looks slightly more professional, but ultimately your domain is like 5% of their ultimate impression. If your portfolio is what matters the most, your resume comes second after that. or like even less 1%. I don't know, but yeah, it doesn't matter so much.
Anyone else have questions? Oh, Chapa asked, is it better to code your own site?
If you like it, sure, but I would recommend you spend most of your time on your case studies and optimizing that. No one's gonna hire you for the fact that you coded your website. People are definitely gonna hire you for the fact that you can do UX work. It's like that. But if you think of it as a hobby, or if you think of it as, hey, I want to code my website because it gives me the ability to talk to developers because I understand code, do it then. But you don't need to code your website for the job. Yeah, that's the thing. So make sure you're clear on the reasons of why you want to do it.
Okay. Emily asked, is there any advice you'd give to yourself when you were first putting your portfolio together?
Oh, great. This is a doozy. Yes, I would. In fact, here's the advice I would give. The advice is simple. Don't waste time on design first. Make sure you write a tight case study. Make sure you have the visuals to storytell that case study. Then you can start thinking about, okay, I want my portfolio's color scheme to be this way. I want the cover images to be like that. Like the visuals of your portfolio are probably, like the visual complexity of your portfolio is probably the least amount of time that I should have spent, but I spent the most amount of time on it. So I did it backwards. But if anyone else is doing that, yeah, your content matters the most, followed by if you can present it like in a very simple website, which is good UX, you know. But yeah, don't over design it. Is Bill here yet?
Okay, we have a question from Rodolfo. He said, circling back to Arjun's question, having two sections, UX as well as other design projects, branding, game design, etc. How many examples would you limit in each section?
Great question. If you've just started out in the UX field, I would do this. I would include my best UX projects, right? And then I would include, I would tend to make it, if you have the UX projects to show, then show them. If you can do like 3 or 4, show those, and keep your other projects to about 2 or 3, or just very thought-provoking projects. If you have them, you can go over. But if you have the work to show more UX work, less personal work, or take them to a completely different website. Like if you have a GitHub profile or something like that, there you can list literally everything, right? But make sure the focus of your portfolio stays centered on your UX work. On the other hand, if you don't have a lot of work, if you're a student just starting out, right? In that case, I would say, hey, I do this UX work, and mention like 1 or 2 projects, but then show a lot more diversity or a lot more passion in your side project. So you can go up to 5, 6, whatever you think is a good number. You just want to show them that you're a enthusiastic individual who is committed to UX. But if you have more UX work to show, that will speak better to it than including side projects. If you don't, then you can use your side projects as a personality boost or whatever. Like just to show them that you do cool things on the side and you're very committed to learning and doing good in UX. Does that answer your question? Let me know if that's clear or not.
Niku asked, are there any tips for making your portfolio personable? Is it important to show personality, or should you keep it strictly professional and only focus on showing your case studies?
Right, great question, Niku, and I have an answer for you there. Okay, guys, so at the end of the day, when you apply to a UX design job, this is like one of those things you can put next to a hard pills to swallow meme. Your skills actually are very replaceable. So if you keep it professional, you could just be, if you keep it only professional and only show your hard skills, right? Your hard skills of doing the UX work, you kind of become like a person who is like easily replaced in the interview process if they find someone even slightly better or slightly more quirky or personality driven, stuff like that. So a good way of sort of doing this is to throw in like side projects and stuff. Like I have this section on a design journal, which is just me doing random like art stuff, which has no cohesion in itself. Like these are not from the same project or anything. This is just stuff I've produced. But you can throw in stuff like this to add a bit more personality. You can have an if you go to your about page, you could put in like a story of where you're from, what got you to this point, like stuff like that. These are sprinkles of personality you can add. But at the end of the day, also notice that my portfolio is very strictly like professionally designed. There's no crazy animations going on. The visual design isn't heavy or overwhelming. But yeah, you can create sections where you put in this information to make you stand out a bit more.
Any more questions?
Let's go, let's go.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, you can proceed, Vivian.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. We're doing pretty well on time, so maybe after the portfolio review, if we still have some time, we can come back to questions if needed. But I really appreciate all the great questions from the audience. And
yeah,
we'll now move on to portfolio review. We have 3 folks who have volunteered to share their portfolios, and Aashrey already has their portfolios lined up. And yeah, we're just ready whenever you are, Aashrey.
Sounds good. I also want to thank everyone for asking great questions. This was a really good set, but think about more because we'll probably have time at the end. Okay, let me share my screen. Let's go. All right, so this is mine, wrong portfolio. Okay, first up is Nilu Alavi. Sorry if I butchered your name, but you can tell me how to pronounce it on Zoom as well. No worries. Let me just get my thing. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so from the top right, I'm a human-centered problem solver that enjoys storytelling, visual elements, homie app. Okay, this might be in progress, but like these are very janky. I'm sure you didn't intend for this to happen here, but if you did, let me know. It's totally fine. All right, cool. So my initial reactions is this page is kind of loosely put together. For example, especially this part, right? I at this point, without any context on this section, I just look at these cards and I see images and devices. I assume these are projects, but I don't know for a fact right now. Like this might be something else to me. Yeah, the problem being you've not clearly highlighted that this is professional work or things like that. Like is this professional work, personal work, things like that. Next is I have to actually mouse over these cards to get to, hey, what is this? And that seems to be, that's a problem because you're actually expecting the user to hover over something first. Like when I scroll to this page, the information should be immediately readable. I should just be able to look at this without moving my hands and make a decision about what project I want to click. This may also not work on mobile phones because you're actually relying on a hover interaction. And on mobile phones, it's hard to do hover interactions. You usually just tap, right? So think about those things. Like think about how you're presenting this information and how you could make it readable right at the beginning without the need for any kind of interaction other than scrolling. Same thing here. These sections suffer from the same things. And also, I'm not sure what T-service is, but I'm just going to go up and look at your first project here. Okay, cool. This gray text is hard to read, like straight off the bat. The color's too blended into the black, also not accessible. So you might want to look at that. I like this. Project overview is simple and small. Challenge solution. This is great too. Like you put them side by side. This way, when you put two things side by side, you don't force the user to read them in serial order, which means if he does not care about challenge, the reader can just skip to solution. That's something to keep in mind, like whenever you're writing sections that are related. Again, this is poor contrast. Also, if this is an image, it's probably better to visually separate this as opposed to just letting it blend in with the black background, just to give it some kind of border or some treatment, which makes it look like you're looking at a cohesive whole. Because the problem becomes, I don't know if this image ends here at this white border or if this whole thing is supposed to be the illustration, right? So I could correlate two parts which are not related, just to keep in mind there. So you always want to mark your images so that the boundaries are clear. This text is, I said that already, it's not accessible. This stuff is too small to read. Like I can read it now because my eye, like, yeah, I'm looking at it on a big screen, but this is hard to read. So this needs to be bigger and more readable. With portfolios, think about it like this. Your minimum font size should be 16 points or pixels. If you can get it to 20, that's ideal. Needs, this is cool. It's a smallish paragraph. Yeah, the same comments I said before apply to these these graphics as well. Competitors and feature comparison. Think about this. Think about this. Okay, think about it. If there was some way that if there was some way that this image didn't need the text above it to make it understandable, right? Think about that. Like I'll give you an example. In my work, what I've done is I've given each image a title. So you could look at this in isolation and figure out everything that I'm trying to tell you. You don't need to read a paragraph of my case study to understand what this image does or is telling you. I'm basically trying to convey the same thing. Like if you can do that to your images, that would be great. This is great. Like explain a bit of your a bit more about your work. These are not readable. You can't put 3 personas on the screen and have them this small, because this information might actually be relevant to somebody who is trying to evaluate your work. So make them big, make them readable. All of this is not accessible. So all of this is hard to read because of the colors. And let's see. Information architecture diagrams are good, but there's the same problems. Like your graphics could be a lot better, a lot clearer in general. Yeah, I think I'll leave the rest of this case study now because it's really long, and I want to jump to another person's portfolio. But this is what I'm saying. When I'm reviewing portfolios, personally, around this mark, like after I've gone through the first 3 sections, is when I feel like jumping off it. And if I see this much more, I will start crying. No, I mean, it's feedback. So yeah, don't take it the wrong way. All right, cool. Let's go to Vivian's. Vivian Tai. I hope I said that right. Vivian is a creative problem solver based in Washington metropolitan area. She is passionate about solving real world problems through technology, design, and collaboration. Okay, I like your opening statement, Vivian. It gives you a bit more grounding as a person because you tell them where you live, you tell them you're creative and you like solving problems. You could do this, you could make this a little more concrete. Instead of saying she is passionate about solving real world problems, because you've already said creative problem solver, what you could do is you could say, hey, I am passionate about design and I love creating prototypes, or I have skills in research and stakeholder management and things like that. Give them a bit of hard skills to tease some of your hard skills here, because a recruiter is going to go look at this and say, oh, she can talk to engineers really well. That's great. I want that. It's like that. It's kind of builds your narrative there. I like this view my work thing. I would make it a little bigger. That's just visual design comment. I like these cards. These cards are exactly what helps make people, what helps people make a decision about what project to click into. You give a one-liner, you tell them what kind of project this is, right? So cool, let's look at Aid for COVID. Great title, by the way. Again, I like this one-liner to explain what it is that you've done. Also some time, time reference here. Yeah, all this is good. Like why do it, the team, how we started, these are great. A potential layout you could consider to tighten this up a little more and make it take less vertical space. Vertical space is your premium in a case study, by the way. It's the currency of your case study, if you will. One thing you can experiment with is doing something like this, where, you know, title of the project doesn't have to be flashy or big. Quick description, and you break out all the other things here so it's a little more scannable. So client, role, team, timeline, stuff like that. Yep. And then from here, you jump straight into your methods. But the thing I like here is that you're explaining each of these deliverables with a self-contained sort of blurb. So I could look at just brainstorming and I could at least get a sense of, hey, what was this used for and what deliverables came out of it. This is also really good because you're showing your work alongside like a very relevant description, and the paragraphs are all small. Testing, I like this. Another thing to think about here, this is, everyone should think about this. Use your headings really well. If a reviewer just read testing and then just read the headings, do your headings tell a story? Think about that, because I may not read this paragraph. I might be short on time. So it says testing, first phase, finding participants. Great. Second, defining the goals. Third, gathering feedback. That gives me a very clear story of how this testing phase proceeded, and that's perfect. So that's really nice. Stick with this. I would make these paragraphs more consistent with how you're displaying them above, because you want to make sure your visual styling of your across your different images is kind of consistent, then they don't have to recalibrate to like a different visual style every time. Okay, so this is a little problematic. The final decision and 2 images. I don't have any context about what this is, why it solves the problem, and how you use your data to, you know, create this design. I may not know what SWOT means. And I could read these, but acronyms in general, just be very careful. You could say strength, opportunities, weaknesses, threats analysis, but that's very wordy, so I understand your problem here. This is, so self-reflections are controversial. I personally like them, but what I would do with every kind of self-reflection piece is show it to your peers and get the sense. You want your reviewer to leave with a good taste in their mouth and not like, hey, this project went to shit at the end. So make sure your self-reflections appropriately reflect that. Focus on your learnings, focus on what good things happened in the project, what went well, and how your decisions drove positive outcomes. That's probably the most important part. I like this too. Start a conversation with me at, very simple, email, LinkedIn, Medium, GitHub. Let me look at Nilu's real quick to see what her footer was like. Right, Nilu, so you could also add something similar where you leave a conversational ending to your website. Hey, I love this kind of work. Get in touch with me at blah, blah, blah. And then all your social. These are good, but that would like add to it. I'm sorry, I might not say this name correctly. Shalpon Zamir. Again, sorry if I butchered that. I love design and problem solving. UX allows for both. I'm going to be a little critical here and say that this sounds generic. Firstly, because literally every UX designer in the world likes design and problem solving, right? What if your tagline doesn't always have to differentiate you as a wholly unique person, like, you know, there's no one else in the world like me, doesn't always have to do that. Could be as simple as, hey, I'm a person, I live here, I enjoy these things, and these are my hard skills. Just that is fine. So, and the thing is that genuinely makes you unique because you've just described yourself instead of giving two attributes that are commonly expected of UX designers. Okay, so let's go forward, right? Again, I have no clue what this is. I could guess that I could guess that this is your professional work, but that's a guess. You don't actually tell me. Also, I'm not a big fan. This is personal preference to a certain extent, but I'm not a big fan of this sort of swapping layout where the text changes, goes from left to right, because it changes my reading line. Like I'm reading in this area first, and then I have to swap here, and then I have to swap here. On a good day, this is fine. On a bad day, this is annoying. So you don't know what frame of mind your reviewers are in, but I would recommend you keep text to the left or to the right just to make the reading line consistent. All right. Again, I would recommend you add like a conversational ending to your portfolio. How are we on time? Okay, PG Crime website. Hey, cool. This is also a great thing to do. If you have images, click them to, click to zoom in should be a thing like everywhere. You should always have that for everything on your website. The problem, the solution, this is great. You summarize it really well. But what you don't do is you don't give any other context of like, was this done in a team? Who was the client? How long was this project? What was your role? Things like that. Those details matter. So you should include them in the beginning. The wireframes. These are great wireframes. But there's like no information around them. I'm not sure what I'm looking at here. Like, is this a home page? Is this a search page? Is this the county website? Is this something else? That kind of thing. This is clearly an illustration, but of what data? Because even when you say PG crime, there's a lot of different statistics you can look at. So what specific statistics? This is, again, there's no context around these things. So just adding context would massively help here. And then you include a link to full website. What does that do? Okay, so I'm guessing this is a prototype, maybe, but your thing says here full website. So the person clicking this could assume that this is a live product that you've just linked them to, and that's wrong in this case. So, and then they could just think, oh, okay, this person was not representing information accurately. So you want to make sure that if it's a prototype, it says it's a prototype. And actually, this is a bit I want to talk about for just a minute. For anyone here thinking about linking prototypes, embedding Figma prototypes in their portfolio, or just embedding Figma artboards, do not do that. Linking a user to a live prototype is death, because you take all the effort of figuring out the prototype and you burden them with it. Like, let's say you've designed a really complicated prototype. Your users probably, your reader is completely unfamiliar and seeing it for the very first time. They are not going to take the time to figure out all the buttons and all the touch points. Instead, always record a video, always record a prototype video and put it at the very top or somewhere relevant. Then you take the burden off. They just have to watch it. It's like Netflix. And that's great. So that's how I recommend everyone include prototypes on their portfolio. All right, this is great. Let's look at chat here. I'll stop sharing. I hope you all found this helpful, but if you have more questions, you can always email me after and I will reply to everyone. So what's the time? We have 4 minutes. Let's go. Any questions?
Yeah. There's one question from, what's your opinion of a personal logo? Did you answer that one already? Just to make sure.
No, I did not.
Okay.
What's your opinion of a personal logo? Do it if you have time. Do it if you're trying to brand yourself. Like if you want to go on to become a speaker, have business cards, give UX talks, and want a recognizable online presence. If you're only going to make the logo and stick it on your portfolio, it's useless. It doesn't do anything for you. Should we create our own device mockup or okay to use free resources found online? Yeah, for device mockups, just grab something from the internet. Facebook has a huge repository of mockups you can use. Just Google Facebook device mockups. Can you help students describe their client work clearly so that they don't say worked at or for a client versus did a class project with them? That's a good question. So if you do let's say you do a class project with a real client, I would say, hey, we work with this client for blah, 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 as a class project. Mention both aspects, because if you say just client work, it could assume, the reviewer could assume that you were part of like an agency or a freelancing thing and you were paid for that work. But you want to mention both things. And Bill and Carol and I have had these conversations before, so they actually have more guidance on this, but just make sure you mention both halves of it. When you put things like this on your portfolio, you have to make sure you represent truth accurately, because you do not know how other people will interpret it if you haven't represented it 100%. They could be kind and say, oh, you probably forgot it, or, you know, it was a mistake. Or they could be, well, this person's just shady. They could do that. Did you already link the portfolios you recommend we look at? No, I did not, but here. Let me work with the UXTerps team and send you guys an email after this. So I'll do it on that.
Sounds good. And I think we have time for one more question before I have to move on to some announcements. Anyone else?
Sounds good.
Okay. I don't see anything so far, but feel free to leave in the chat, and then we'll see if we'll have to resort to email or just if we have time after the announcement to address them. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you again so much for your time, Aashrey, and thanks a lot to like all the volunteers and just the audience for your active participation. And I just want to wish you all the best in your career and just your future projects.
Hey,
And
thanks.
yeah. And if you have more questions for Aashrey, feel free to contact him through the email address that is in his slides. But feel free to also post the email address in the chat if you wish.
Yeah, here, I'll drop my email address real quick.
Perfect, thank you. And yeah, given the interest in this event, I think we're going to have more portfolio workshops and reviews like this one. And we will also be sending out more information about portfolio working days that we're offering next week. And just a little more on what's coming up next. Our annual design makeathon is actually in March. We'll have an information session about that within the next few weeks, and it will be another great way to gain more team design experience and add a fun project to your portfolio. This will actually be our third year hosting, and if you're interested in volunteering or working on this event, or if you're just interested in helping out in general with UXTerps in any way with marketing, design, communications, or general event planning, please send Team UXTerps an email at uxterps@gmail.com. I'll also post it in the chat. But yeah, we would love for you to participate in any way you want to. And soon after this session, we'll be sending out a follow-up email with a survey for you all to complete, as well as Aashrey's slides that he presented just now, and a link to the recording of this presentation. Yeah, thanks again, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your winter break. Is there anything else from Aashrey or just from the audience that you'd like to address?
Hey, I just want to say that it takes a long time to work on your portfolio, but like it's partly about putting the work in, but it's partly also about constraining yourself in creative ways. So if you can do that, like word limits, specific formats, tell a story through images, you'll find that you actually improve faster. Hard limits on your work encourage better solutions. So yeah, think about that. But thanks everyone for coming. It was great sharing this info with you. And yeah, thank you.